Well, I would now like to invite Professor James Thomas, who is the co-director of EPPI Center. He has published extensively on methods for evidence synthesis, particularly combining qualitative and quantitative evidence. He is a co-senior scientific editor of Cochrane Handbook of Systematic Reviews of Intervention, and he's also leading a team that develops and publishes EPPI Reviewer software platform. Today, he will be speaking about developing guidance for the responsible use of AI. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you today. First of all, I'll move on to my conflict of interest disclosure. I've got no actual or potential conflicts of interest, though I am very interested in many things. I'm co-senior scientific editor on the Cochrane Handbook. I'm on the technical advisory group for the Campbell collaboration, co-convener for the Cochrane Qualitative and Implementation Methods Group, and I lead the EPPI Reviewer team at the EPPI Center, which provides machine learning and EPPI Reviewer for Cochrane and many other organizations. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is the need for developing some guidance on the responsible use of AI in evidence synthesis. Obviously, we've all heard quite a lot about this over the last couple of years, but the need for this appears to be accelerating. So some vision statements on the guidance, what we'd like to get from guidance, what's in some guidance that is currently being developed, and especially important, how to get involved in this. This isn't something which should be the property of a small number of individuals or organizations. So why do we need guidance for responsible use of AI? There are two main reasons which I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on. First of all, we need to make better use of technology, including AI, to support our work in evidence synthesis. And secondly, there's a danger that the misuse of artificial intelligence could increase bias and reduce reliability, which is obviously something that we need to avoid. So first of all, thinking about why we need to make better use of technology. As many of us in the room know, we've been involved in evidence synthesis, systematic reviews, and other types of evidence synthesis projects for many years. And the work that we do often impacts on people's lives. And so we have an ethical need to ensure that we do not misrepresent the state of the evidence base. This means that we're very careful and very cautious about how we treat the evidence, and we tend to favor accuracy over efficiency. What that means in practice is we conduct highly sensitive searches in order to avoid selection bias. And we conduct highly accurate and time-consuming quality assurance processes in order to avoid error in the way that we do reviews. This means that whilst we have correctly emphasized accuracy in a responsible way, what we have ended up with is an inefficient and resource-intensive process. We produce reliable outputs, but they're expensive and time-consuming, and they often fail to land at the time that the decisions need them to land. What also this means is that only a fraction of relevant studies actually are included in evidence synthesis products. There are many, many questions which decision makers need evidence to inform their decisions with, which are not covered by evidence synthesis at all, or indeed comprehensively. Added to that, obviously evidence synthesis products often go out of date almost as soon, or if not before, they've actually been published. And so the question of keeping the evidence synthesis ecosystem up to date is a really pressing one. Plus, we don't even know when an evidence synthesis or a systematic review actually needs to be updated, because it's such a time-consuming and cumbersome process. So we really need technology to help us address these issues. Added to this, we've got some challenges with the way that AI technology is currently being developed. Currently, development is often driven by commercial interests. We know from research conducted in industry and outside industry that we are encoding bias in some of the large language models that we're using almost every day now. Additionally, a lot of these tools which are being presented for our use lack any kind of validation and evaluation work. They're simply published for us to use at our own peril. On top of that, we've obviously got this challenge with siloed representations of knowledge from individual publishers who are creating content based on the journals that they happen to have published and the papers that they happen to have got. And so what does that mean in terms of publication bias and selection bias in the answers that such models might give us. On top of that, there are specific evidence synthesis tools out there which knowingly and deliberately and are engineered to produce biased and inaccurate output. I don't know why we think that's acceptable, but that's how it is at the moment. On top of that, who wants to be the dinosaur anyway? There's a challenge for us as evidence synthesizers, evidence synthesists, in that we know that the processes that we currently use take much too long, they're much too expensive, and we fail to produce evidence synthesis when they're needed. And we also know that some of these new tools are very quick. They will produce an evidence synthesis, not quite at the click of a button, but very close to that. And there's a danger that as these new tools become more and more entrenched, that the field is going to become flooded with quickly produced evidence synthesis products, most of which will be inaccurate. Certainly they won't be able to have an audit trail to describe how reliable or what processes have taken place in order for them to be reliable. So my concern here is that the expectations of quality and our processes that we've developed over time have been hard won and hard developed. And the danger is that we're going to come to a situation where decision makers naturally look to the products which actually supply answers at the time that they're needed, but actually of much, much diminished accuracy. So in summary, we can't afford to ignore AI. We need it in order to update and keep up to date with the data deluge that we're all experiencing, but we also need it in order for decision making and for decision makers to have access to reliable evidence synthesis. So what I and a number of others have been working on is a vision for an ecosystem, another ecosystem, which is not all that far away from your ecosystem, of roles. And we've specifically looked at roles rather than specific individuals, which together will jointly develop and use and support the use of AI in responsible ways. So we need to support this because of the burden of doing timely and cost-effective synthesis. And we need to develop cross-field standards so that we're doing this consistently and also that we're building on one another's efforts, because at the moment we're not really making very much progress. So what we're anticipating is this ecosystem that's made up of individuals and organizations that produce evidence synthesis, methodologists, AI development tools, tool development teams, organizations, funders, publishers, and there are other roles within this ecosystem which can be played. And it's important to emphasize that the way that we're conceptualizing this is that these are roles and they're not individuals. So me as an individual, sometimes I'm an evidence synthesist. I do systematic reviews and other types of evidence synthesis. Sometimes I'm a methodologist, and I wear my methodologist hat, where I'm thinking about evidence synthesis methods and research methods more generally. Sometimes I code in Python, and I'm writing tools, and there I might be in a tool development. Sometimes involved in an organization. So we as individuals may wear many hats, but it's quite important, I think, to consider which hat or which role we're playing at any particular point in time. So running through these roles, just in a little bit of detail, the evidence synthesist. I'm sure there are many evidence synthesists in the room here, and the point of us, we have expertise in doing reviews, and we know we have responsibility for doing them well. What we need to know is which tools we can use, which are validated and reliable for use in our reviews. We need to know how to use them in ways that enhance and don't undermine our work. We are responsible for ensuring that ethical, legal, and regulatory standards are adhered to in our way that we use them, but what we're not responsible for is developing these tools or responsible for the underpinning evaluation and validation work. We've got enough to do in terms of doing a systematic review or an evidence synthesis. We don't need to do all of the development and evaluation on top of that. Evidence synthesis methodologists, on the other hand, do have that role. Expertise in research methodology and also underpinning best practice and defining what best practice is through robust and rigorous and transparent evaluation. And critically, the methodologists are this link between what is needed in terms of reliable evidence synthesis and the construction and the development of AI tools. So an evidence synthesis methodologist may not have in-depth technical knowledge, may not need to be able to program, but they do need to understand the architecture of AI technologies, how they work at a high level. What we do need especially is an understanding of how collectively we can build and contribute to building a robust and cumulative evidence base that supports the use of AI by evidence synthesis. So the idea here is that we've got different roles, but they're mutually supportive. So this role supports the evidence synthesis to do their work, and also then supports people in AI development teams to understand what is needed. Hopefully, this group obviously has expertise in AI. What the critical point of sort of disjuncture, which we see a little bit at the moment, is that we need to align development of AI tools with principles of research integrity. So we need rigorous, full, open, transparent evaluation, and not marketing, please. There's a role for marketing, fine, tell us about the products, but we also need to know how they work and why they're reliable and why they are useful and not unreliable for use, for example, in my review. One of the pillars of research integrity is about being respectful, and there are a number of sort of aspects of this. There's being respectful for the values of good evidence synthesis. So I know there are tools, and they're very seductive tools, which will provide us very, very quick access to a certain, but often a biased and subsample of the evidence base. Assessing importance in the field, for example, in terms of the number of citations an article happens to have had. Publication bias. There's a lot of work which underpins reasons why we don't do that sort of thing in evidence synthesis, and those sorts of understandings need to percolate through and be embedded within AI development. Being accountable for mistakes. We all make mistakes. We just need to know when they happen. We need to fix them. And one of the things is also, when we have got a model in front of us which we know that, or a tool which doesn't align with expected standards, simply don't push it out to an unsuspecting market, if you like. Don't make it our job to find holes which you already know are there in a model. Organizations that produce evidence synthesis have an absolutely key role to play here in taking some of the methodology development which other parts of the ecosystem have taken on, and then develop and implement standards for policy and conduct, both within organizations but then also working with other organizations in order to develop consistency and coherence across the field. This is something which I think is really quite important in terms of the investment that people need to make in evidence synthesis tools. What we need to do is reduce the uncertainty that investment in a new product naturally brings. If organizations in the field as a whole can say, this is what we need from you as an AI development team, it makes it much easier to justify development in something. There's talk of sort of approving particular approaches, particular tools for use in organizations. And that, again, produces an incentive within an ecosystem to work in a particular way, but also then reduces uncertainty. So mutually reinforcing ways of sort of dynamics within that system, which hopefully will mean that the development of tools is aligned with the needs of users. I'll keep moving. Funders and commissioners, obviously a key role to play in many of our lives. And there are two types of funders that I'm thinking about here. There's funders of evidence synthesis production. And here, what we really need to see from funders is an awareness that actually there are various aspects of how we currently do evidence synthesis which need reform. We need to start using these tools, but we need support to do it. So we need support for evidence synthesists and synthesis methodologists to make this transition to using AI tools in a responsible way. And that means both funding the development of the tools, which is the next point, but also funding the good evaluation of those tools to support that part of the ecosystem. Mandating open science, open standards will support this. Particularly important is supporting and encouraging the sharing of data sets. That's a key role for people across the whole ecosystem, but what tool developers really need and really often lack are good data in order to develop and test their tools. In terms of technology development, fund collaborative teams, make sure that different parts of the ecosystem are represented within the team in order to ensure that the right range of perspectives and expertise are there. Fund, obviously, open and independent evaluations, again, trying to encourage the openness of data sets and the openness of how algorithms work in order to develop a cumulative evidence base. Finally, the publishers of evidence synthesis. Key gatekeepers, obviously, in terms of what is out there in the world, making sure that published evidence synthesis follows those standards and policies that have been emerging through the field. So publishers don't need to develop them. What they need to do is make sure that those standards are implemented in what gets published. Ensure those best practice standards are clear, and also that the guidance is clear for authors, peer reviewers. Request transparency and honesty in terms of use of AI. Follow Prisma, please. There's bits in Prisma which are written deliberately for the application of machine learning, automation, AI in reviews. And a number of papers are very sensational, very, very enthusiastic. Fine if you've got really exciting results, but also try to avoid too much sensationalism. Report limitations as well as benefits. These tools are rarely completely successful. And the final underpinning part of the way the ecosystem will work, and will only work if each part of the ecosystem helps and sort of commits to help the other roles to develop and grow. This is a mutually supportive and mutually reinforcing vision for how we can work here. So there's a draft of this guidance online for consultation already, not just me, there's a number of organizations and individuals involved in it. And our vision here is for it to be a living set of guidelines that's updated through input from everybody in this room. And what we really are looking to see is that we take seriously not just, oh yes, that's the right, you know, we've got the right roles and responsibilities for these people and these organizations in this ecosystem. But actually we then think, okay, so what does that mean in terms of how I do my work? What does that mean in terms of organizational standards? And it's through implementing these roles and responsibilities, not just sort of agreeing that they're the right ones, that we'll actually then start to see the development of these AI tools, which will, if they adhere to those principles, then obviously will then have this virtuous circle which will enable evidence accessibility in rigorous and equitable ways. So the final slide here, there's a QR code here, there's a link, there's a special session tomorrow on this, and there's a timetable for the development of this, which you're all welcome to get involved in. Go to the link, there's instructions there in terms of there's a document to read, there's a form, there's obviously it's on Open Science Framework, so you can write comments there as well. So we're planning to have a period of consultation and input and discussion. Then we'll publish revised versions of both documents. There's two documents envisaged. One is the sort of like the recommendations, and one is a detailed document of guidance. And then during 25, if this works, then we'll develop more formal and structured guidelines. So yes, please do get involved. Come along to the session, and thank you very much for listening.